Our next coach conversion is to take a Bachmann Thompson. In the way that the Gresleys from Hornby's were a bit of a near miss, well, I'm afraid this is a bit far of the mark. It is older, I have to admit that, and in fairness to Bachmann, it is quite an old product. But how do we improve it? I don't know how manufacturers get dimensions wrong. It's really a bit of a puzzle. I mean, it's very easy to be critical, I know, but the roof line on a Thompson coach, Thompson passenger coach, is very bulbous. If you look at a prototype picture, it's more bulbous than a Mark I coach, certainly more than a Gresley coach. So the question is, how have Bachmann got a sharp edge there? And that spoils the whole effect. It suffers too from its age of being very thick plastic sides, or the glazing, which I've removed from this coach, has been discarded, and it's got battleship thick sides. So, you know, you can flush glaze them with products from Southeastern Fine Cast, but I'm going to do something a bit more radical. And the colour too, BR maroon. I mean, it's maroon, well, it's brown, isn't it? It's certainly not right. So how do we address, first of all, the roof? Well, I've had a go at that side. I've taken off all the ventilators and stuff that was on that were on the coach at source, apart from the brake, which should be brake end, which should have the ventilators on the centre line. They're also above the compartments on the coach centre line. They should be above the centre line of the compartment, so they would have had to be changed anyway. Now, on with the giggles. This is a bastard number 2 cut file. It always used to make a riot when I taught metalworking, right? Okay, lads, let's have the bastard files out, and away they would chuckle, and it never failed to get a bit of a giggle. But it's a pretty hefty piece of kit. It's certainly not a fine file. And what I'm going to do is assault the side of the coach to take out that curve. And what I do is draw file to begin with. You will end up with a most horrendous mess. Whatever you do, don't bite into the cantrail. You'll lose the train destination brackets. That's inevitable. You'll also need to take off the rain strip as well, and that will be reinstated later. Again, draw filing. Don't, whatever you do, do that, because you will really bite into the plastic. This is a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but being lazy and slothful, I'm not going to use a very fine file. You can, if you wish, and this is not for the faint-hearted, use a sharp knife in a kind of scraping motion. It has a very sort of satisfying squeal to it, which I'm told puts some people's nerves on edge. I've never been affected by fingers on blackboards, that's something, or biting forks, anything like that. Don't know why, but I used to delight in my teaching days in scraping the blackboard. Doesn't half shut the little beggars up. You should be able to take note of how much that profile has changed. It's now starting to disappear. That sharp edge is starting to go. It's more a sense of feel. I mean, a sensitive finger is very, very handy. You're just not aware anymore of that sharp edge. Now, because this is going to be a very similar, in fact, identical in plan, seating and accommodation to the one I'm replacing it with, I'm leaving these little rain deflectors above the doors. Now, there's also a lot of surface relief which we've got to get rid of, and again, the bastard file comes into it. If you catch your finger or thumb, you'll say bastard file, and nobody will know if you're actually using an expletive, but and again, rub away at that. The ventilators will cause you a little bit more of a difficulty. Now, these files have a safe edge, one that doesn't have any teeth on it, so you can sort of go at it like this. to remove those. It takes a bit of time. Once you've whittled them down, that's when the safe edge comes into its own, and you can actually rub hard against the corners without risk of damage. You can use a finer file just to sort of finish off. I've already started, well, finished taking some of the side out because I want to flush glaze this in the same manner that I did the Hornby Gresley in the last little piece. So what I'm going to do is take out the areas that previously were the apertures for the glazing, and it's nowhere near as brutal as doing on the Hornby Gresley because I still maintain most of the coach. But let's go to our old friend, the mini drill. And once again, working so that if the drill slips, it slips away from the work, not right into it. I needn't remove those because what I'm going to do is just go through. What I'm going to ensure is that I leave enough of a rebate to stick the glazing in. And once more make sure that if the mini saw slips, it slips away from where you're working. Bachmann plastic is less resistant than Hornby, it would appear. And then that just picks out. And you can clean up with the sharp knife, always cutting away from your fingers, always. So if you slip, all you do is go into the plastic, which you can repair. The big file's job is finished now, so we can just dress this back with a small file. I'm going to be using Southern Pride overlays. Now, these can be supplied by Southern Pride, obviously, and also Comet do overlays. It really does improve the coach 100%. This is how they come. The tumble home is formed for you. You have to put door furniture on and what have you, which I've done on this side. That takes a little bit of time, but you get this relief, you get flush glazing. It's so much better. Now this is one of the 1948 Scotsman pressure ventilated for the know-alls amongst us. The way to tell is the sole bar is covered by this extension. It rotted away like mad. Post-war steel was pretty grotty and the coaches suffered terribly from rot, but well, brass won't rot anyway. So how do we go about putting this door furniture on? Dave Lewis of Southern Pride has very cleverly given you these little ventilators attached to that space underneath the guards compartment. So what I'm going to do is utilize the fact that they're still in position and tin them, because they have to be soldered into these apertures. You don't have to be particularly scientific about this. Use that word again, didn't I? As long as they're not absolutely covered in masses of solder. The reason for tinning will be evident pretty quickly. Whatever you do, don't get solder on the parent side. And then we can just nick these out. Do as I say, not as I do. It really is ruinous to a decent knife, but if you just sort of nick these, it's a decent way of removing frets from the parent metal, and then just nip that away. And nip that away. that will be cleaned up later. And then let's prepare these. Remember the fun we had removing the ones that Bachmann had so nicely put on for us. Just clean that up. What I'm going to do now is just tin the area to which this is going to be soldered. And then I'm going to sweat it. Actually, I'm sweating. Hold it in position, turn over. First of all, flood the joint with flux. People have winced at me doing this. They say, I don't know how I do it. Well, you just grin and bear it. Now, if that's worked, and it has, that's actually sweated in position. If it is slightly out of position, you can just move it. It might just need a twitch, I don't know. One thing you also get are the door hinges, and you have to fit these in. Now, Mike Trice gives you really good door hinges, a bit cleverer than Dave Lewis. But I mean, that's not a problem. I mean, you just pass these through and you get a bit of scrap etch, and there's miles of it. You get 2 or 3 of these in the thing, so that's not a problem. And just, it's a bit repetitive, and I'm certainly not going to solder all of these in. I will do eventually, but not to camera. And that comes through. It's far too much. So what you do is just lop off, first of all, lop off at the back the excess. Maybe I've used a bit too much, but just sort of rest the zurons on the side, and the natural angle will give you the distance. Don't lop off too much. And the bottom hinge was always longer because that took into account the tumble home. And then just clean that. And then you just repeat top and bottom. The door handles and grab rails went in exactly the same as I showed you on the Gresley, the Hornby Gresley conversion. So that doesn't need repetition here. One thing that might need explaining is these grab rails. They're on the brakes. They're certainly not on the Hornby conversions I did. So how do we fit those? With difficulty is the stock answer, but it's not too bad. Just take your pliers, 0.45 nickel silver wire. Now just check where they go. Dave doesn't actually tell you on the drawing. In fact, it's a bit of a sort of a generic drawing, but I know from observing the coaches that you have 2 vertical ones either side of the door, and then 2 horizontal ones that attach onto those. So what I'm going to do is fit the vertical ones in to begin with, and the horizontal ones are put in a very similar manner. And just measure that, rest it against it. Now I tend to leave as much wire on as possible. Got to thread it through. Do check, it's very easy to stick these through where they're not supposed to go. Right, that's it. Bit of scrap cardboard. This is from fuse wire. And you just sort of rest that. It's a very simple dodge. Well done, Ian Rice. He explained this. And that gives you the right distance away. And then all you do is just solder it. Just check. Yes. Let's lop these off. And if you see there, that then is the right distance away. Clean it up. and you repeat. There and there and there and there and there and all these. And you retire to the safety and security of your room and just get on with it. It is just repetition. Until in the end you finish up with this, which is going to go on the side. But you get a lot of solder and scrap, not scrap brass, but the ends of the brass coming through. The ends of the hinges, the end of the door handles, the ends of the bits of wire. So how do we get rid of that? Now, do make friends with your dentist. Because once burrs, dental burrs are no good for doing teeth, they still have masses of life left in them for doing this kind of thing. Solder isn't as resilient as teeth. Now again, if you can, remember that this is a tool, it's rotating fairly quickly and it will try to bite. It will bite into the brass, it'll certainly bite into the solder and the scrap bits of brass showing through. And if you go too near a window aperture, that way as it were, you'll go right through and it will mark the side. As with all of my knowledge, how do I know? Because I've done it. Now obviously there, don't do it that way, do it that way. So if you slip, you just end up going into brass. And we've cleaned up the side. Now this is going to go on there and take the place of the hideous manifestation that was there before. It does fit perfectly. At least the Bachmann coach is exactly the same length. How do you fix it on? We fix it on with the time-honoured Evo stick. Now you can actually use it straight from the tube here, so I'm just going to sort of smear it on. It's a bit sort of mucusy. Horrible in many ways. Yeah, we're just about there now. So, although Evo stick grabs pretty quickly, you've got a little bit of leeway. So rest it up against the roof, the cornice. Check that you're right fore and aft. Tiny bit that way. And then just clamp it on. It will ooze out. You want it to ooze out. And then press very firmly where it needs to be joined. And where it's oozed out at the top, just rub it back with the fiberglass stick. You can see sort of a bit of a grotty mess comes out. Clean the ends. As I say, if the Evo stick oozes out all to the good, that means it's doing its job. And there we are. And obviously it's a bit unfair to compare it with that side, but all this furniture is pretty, I mean, because it's soldered on and it's to brass. There are some people who are timid of soldering. Don't be. The only way to fix bits of metal to brass is solder, and it doesn't come off. And that's it for that stage. Now, I'm going to get some lunch. So when we come back, I shall fix the roof detail on and show you how to improve the bogies. The next job is to complete the roof detail on this coach. These 48 Thompson Flying Scotsman coaches were pressure ventilated, so they didn't have as many torpedo vents, but obviously the guard wasn't considered of high enough status for his compartments to be pressure ventilated. If you look along here, you've got the centre line of the coach marked by where the original torpedo vents went, but it's a good idea to plot the centre line of the coach anyway, and I'm going to use these dividers, and the trick is just sort of go more or less to that, but just check, and then do it from the other side, and it should be equidistant. And then you can make a mark. If you're not sure exactly where the bits are going to go, if the mark isn't clear enough, then you can just run some black felt tip marker along approximately where you want it. And the tips of the dividers will scratch through to the plastic. We have these monsoon ventilators, which are provided by Dave. If I can pick them up, they're tiny little plastic bits, and they were the pressure ventilators over the passenger compartment. Now, he gives you dimensions, but it's just as easy really to take the dimensions off the drawing. So this is a simple trick. Mark that. So then open the dividers. They should just about go to the position of the next one. Not far off, is it? Pretty damn close. Rest there. Mark there. Let's go back to the dividers to make sure we're on the centre line. Not far off. There we are. And then we can fix these on with plastic weld. What I do is just put a little bit of plastic weld in the right place, not too much. These have a top and bottom, so make sure you put the bottom to the bottom and pop it into position. Squeeze down on that centre line. Your eye will tell you as much as any measurement whether it's absolutely spot on centre. Just make sure it's not sort of leaning one way or the other. It can happen. Now we come to the torpedo vents. So they're over the guard's compartment. So mark that. Where that's marked, and drill a pilot hole. This is just a little pin chuck, pin vise, and I explained this on the locomotive building DVD, but it's very relevant here. Have a drawing pin to protect your little pinkies or the palm of your ball of your hand. Okay, move on to the next one. These are the torpedo vents that Dave has provided us with. Very neat little castings. So what I'm going to do is open up the holes to accommodate those with a tapered broach. Much easier this method than trying to drill them dead right first time. You'll need sort of 2 or 3 broaches probably, but it's best to make the holes slightly oversized. It gives you a bit of adjustment sort of one way or the other. They should all be vertical. You'll find prototype pictures where they're not all in line either. I can't imagine every single one had this diligence of assembly about it. Me being diligent? No, forget that. Get the sort of gooey super glue, which we've seen before. Decant some onto a piece of wire. A bit wasteful, I know. Hold that with your fingers and then just allow the super glue to run round. It doesn't matter if a little bit of burr remains inside. if you put just the right amount on, it won't ooze through and get on your fingers. If you put too much, that will happen. And there we've got our torpedo vent. And then you repeat the operation. Obviously that final broach is just the right size. I'm not going to put every single one on, but our next job has to reinstate the rain strip. Now if you've been careful, where it goes will still be seen. So this is micro strip or micro rod, and it has a sort of bend to it, so you can exploit that. And again, we'll be using the plastic weld. So exploit the bend that this thing might have. Start here, sort of tack it into more or less the right position. It does grab pretty quickly. And then use where the original one, which was by the way in the right place, use that as a guide and work your way along. Again, these are pretty uniform, but you do find examples on the real thing where it's a bit wobbly. It's only a wooden strip or something. Nothing really sort of rocket science-y. Move along. Again, turn this into perspective. There's a bit of a wobble there, so just sort of squeeze with a fingernail so it goes back to where it should be. If you do it at this stage while the adhesive is still pretty liquid, it does grab quite quickly. Don't try and do this 3 or 4 hours later. And if it's a bit reluctant to go, just re-wet it. That's just about it. And then lop these off. We've lost the train destination board brackets, but they can be reinstated with the micro strip, the same stuff that was used to make the cantrail. Nick Campling or John Edgson does drawings for these. This is the basis of the coach, the base of the coach. Much easier to put together than the one that Hornby provided for the Gresley and the interior. So obviously this interior is handed, so pop that back, clip this back in, should go to where it was originally. There we are, we haven't interfered with that. Footboards are provided by Dave as little etchings, although he doesn't do the long one for this. What I suggest you use for that is plastic. If I can go to this one, which is now reassembled. This is just plastic card, black plastic card, just cut to the size of the drawing. Just the right thickness, you'll know what the thickness is. And then that can be stuck on there, but Dave does actually give you a little etch for that. The bogies, as they come, are okay. They should be heavy duty for the pressure ventilated stock, but we'll let that go. A hideous tension lock coupling, and in classic mode, off it goes. Gone. Just clean that up. Now these wheels are second only to Hornby's in their hideousness. Metal axle, plastic wheel. So don't throw these entirely away. There might be some child who needs a spare set of wheels. I'm replacing them with Markets, decent ones, metal wheels. They just drop in. I have heard worries that you have a pinpoint metal axle and you have a plastic coach. I've run plastic coach bogies for a long time without too much trouble. If they do wear, then you have to fit little plastic, little metal top hat bearings. Now it's a bit of a fight this, and you need fairly powerful fingers and thumb to get them in. Now at first they might be just a tiny bit tight, that is, so just squeeze it and they bed themselves in. And there we are, that's rolling now, a bit more. And that's rolling beautifully. And much better, these wheels. Just to make sure that you haven't interfered with the back-to-back, just slip the back-to-back gauge in. We haven't done. Drop the next one in. And then that just fits back on there. We can screw this one back in. This is a much better way of fixing bogies on than Hornby's. Simon, please note, I don't have any favourites or favouritism, but and that's just about it for coaches. This will be painted in the same way that's been explained by me and much better by Ian in part 3. Obviously, painting and finishing has taken place. So here they are, photographs of them. Not ones I made earlier, actual photographs of the ones you saw under construction or under modification.